It looks like Trump's former press secretary and longtime loyalist Kayleigh McEnany will join the long list of former administration officials now at odds with the former president. So first, here's what started it all.
Here's why I say this. This was actually a fairly good night for Joe Biden. When you look at our voter analysis, only 10% said, I would not vote for Joe Biden if he's the nominee. He won a plurality of voters who said he was too old. He won a majority of voters who are upset about the Gaza war. So the divides in the Democrat Party, and this is a small sample size, but perhaps aren't as stark as one would think. But when you look at the Republican Party, 7 in 10 Nikki Haley voters said, I would not vote for Trump. There was the Des Moines Register poll, 43% said, no, I wouldn't vote for Trump. If I'm Trump, I sit back and I exclusively focus on the general election. I take the posture of a presumptive nominee. I focus on number one, uniting the party, and number two, winning the independents, which Nikki Haley won 55 to 39%. That's what I would do. Nikki Haley, I mean, the closest margin is 30% in the states ahead. For all intents and purposes, he's the presumptive nominee.
Now, this is actually very reasonable political analysis, and I'll get to that in a moment, but Trump, for his part, isn't interested in what's reasonable or what's accurate, he is interested in fealty. And because Kayleigh McEnany didn't just breathlessly grovel at his feet and explain how he will win and Joe Biden will lose, and the whole world loves Trump and anyone who doesn't should be jailed, because she didn't do that, here's what Trump had to say. He took to Truth Social, writing, I don't need any advice from Rhino Kayleigh McEnany on Fox, just had a giant victory over a badly failing candidate, Bird Brain, and she's telling me what I can do better. Save your advice for Nikki. That's apparently all it takes to fall out of favor with Donald Trump. If you don't blindly perpetuate his talking points and give him total fealty, you get publicly shamed. And let's be clear, this isn't a one-off. This is what happens every single time. Donald Trump said that Paul Manafort, his campaign chairman, came into the campaign very late and was with us for a short period of time. He called George Papadopoulos, his foreign policy advisor, a low-level volunteer. He said of Gordon Sondland, his EU ambassador and campaign donor, I have not spoken to him much, this is not a man I know well. He said Michael Cohen, his own lawyer and fixer, did a, quote, tiny fraction of his legal work. Of Sidney Powell, he wrote, despite the fake news reports to the contrary, and without even reaching out to ask the Trump campaign, Ms. Powell was not my attorney and never was. In fact, she would have been conflicted. And the list goes on and on, but the point here is clear. Donald Trump will throw you under the bus the moment he feels that you become politically inconvenient for him. And the only thing more embarrassing than being thrown under the bus by Donald Trump is the fact that any of these people sell their soul to the guy in the first place, thinking that somehow it won't eventually happen to them too. At some point, everyone will be discarded by Donald Trump, even the people who are so deluded into thinking that they, unlike everyone else, are special. As for Kayleigh McEnany committing the sin of uttering just a few honest words, she's actually right. For all of the media's breathless coverage of his flaws, Joe Biden has very little issue right now consolidating support among Democrats. Sure, there are the expected defections for one thing or another, but largely he's uniting his coalition. Donald Trump, however, doesn't have that luxury. As McEnany said, 7 in 10 Haley voters in New Hampshire said that they wouldn't vote for Trump. And Nikki Haley isn't some left-wing spoiler, she is a lifelong Republican. She was the South Carolina governor. She was Donald Trump's own UN ambassador. And what's worse, in New Hampshire, she garnered nearly half of the vote. In other words, 70% of Nikki Haley's voters, which account for about 45% of the entire Republican primary electorate, are not just casually voting for Haley because they prefer her over Trump for now, only to ultimately come home to whoever the GOP nominee is in the end. These are people who have declared that they won't vote for Donald Trump, meaning they are absolutely ripe to be picked off by Joe Biden. And if you don't believe me, take it from those voters themselves.
Versus Biden, what are you going to do?
That really puts me in a quandary. I frankly am more scared of another Trump term than another Biden term.
I would probably end up either voting for myself as a protest or for Biden.
And who'd you vote for?
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley?
Yes.
When did you decide to vote for her?
Yesterday, 4 hours between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m., I decided to vote for Haley.
Oh, that's a very specific hour time. I like that. So what made you decide? What about her excites you?
Well, I wanted to vote for Chris Christie, but he dropped out. And what excites me about her is that she appears to be pro-democracy as opposed to dictatorship and autocracy, which I associate with Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Would you, she could do very well here in New Hampshire. We'll see. We don't know what's going to happen. If she doesn't and she's not the nominee, are you open to supporting Donald Trump?
Never.
Never. Would you be open to supporting Joe Biden?
I voted for Joe Biden. I would gladly vote for him again.
It was a Haley or bust for you.
Yeah, she's closest to moderate.
If Donald Trump does become the nominee, would you vote for him in the general election?
Under no circumstances.
What do you think you would do in the general then?
Biden.
Biden?
Yep.
Now, in terms of Biden being able to secure those Haley voters, I spoke with former Republican operative Tim Miller as part of our new series called Inside the Right, and here's what he had to say.
It is also extremely abnormal for the people that dissent, the minority that dissents within the party, to be so hostile to the person that's winning, right? And if the comparison is right, like Al Gore and Bill Bradley, it's not like in the New Hampshire primary in 2000, for the old timers, the Bill Bradley supporters were like, I hate Al Gore and I'd never vote for him. It was like, yeah, it was a family feud. It's like a typical primary. This is something that's a category difference. And if you look at the numbers across the board, that conviction number on the exit poll is one, but just the Nikki Haley voters' views of Donald Trump's claims about the 2020 election, for example, 83% of Nikki Haley voters in New Hampshire today said they believe him to be lying about that. I just think that shows that the Haley contingent, the Haley coalition, is extremely hostile to Trump and very open to Biden. And I do think that is something that the Biden campaign should be optimistic about. And it's something that, we're going to keep talking about. We're going to keep watching. And I don't think it is really going to show up in the polls for another month or two, right? There's just a little lag on this stuff as it sinks in with normie voters who aren't like watching political YouTubes constantly, right? And so I hope that there's a little lag on that. And I think that cadre of like Haley voters is going to be very gettable for Biden. It's something that we're obviously focused on in our kind of never Trump world over at the Bulwark.
Tim, building on exactly what you were just saying, a lot of Haley's support is based on basically her voters not wanting Donald Trump, and they're not shy about coming out and saying that is the reason. 40% of her voters were voting for her because they didn't want her opponent. That was part of a CNN exit poll. How big of a problem is it for Donald Trump right now that at a time when he should be expanding his support, he lost the 2020 election by small margins, these base voters should be a given. He should be reaching out he should be using this time to expand his support into independents and suburban moms and college educated voters, that instead he seems to be eroding support from within the Republican primary base.
Yeah. And he doesn't seem to be trying that hard about that. And so maybe that'll change at some point, but I don't know if you saw his speech on Monday night in New Hampshire. It was insane. And they were chanting QAnon chants at this speech. Like, where we go one, we go all. The crowd was chanting. He's smiling at them. He's talking about freeing the J6ers. It was a totally wheels off speech aimed at the hardest of the hardcore MAGA voters, even kind of casual Donald Trump supporters, wouldn't even really know what he was talking about. He was so deep into the expanded MAGA universe talking points. And so I do think that it's a problem for him. And I think that when you look at those Haley voters, you didn't see a lot for Trump that he's offering to them. There's going to be a certain percentage. Then, if you look at the numbers, what jumped out as me is Haley only got 25% of the self-identified Republicans tonight, according to the exit polls. It could be off a little bit, but so some percentage of those, maybe call it half, are Republicans and are going to end up voting for Trump, et cetera. But that's still a big percentage, right? You're still looking at a very significant number of Republicans, and then not to mention the independents and Democrats that voted for her, that are all going to be very gettable for Biden. Trump has shown no evidence that he's trying to appeal to those voters. And, there was a little buzz in the commentary at the, pundit class on cable. It was like, well, maybe he's going to pick Haley as VP to reach out to those voters. Doesn't seem like it. I mean, who knows, right? But he's insulting her on stage tonight. There's just not... he seems to be ride or die with his people right now. And I think that he's a little bit high on his own supply of the poll numbers. I think he really thinks that he's winning. And I don't think he recognizes that there is this contingent of voters that really dislikes him, that is not registered that it's Biden Trump yet, that right now in polls are kind of showing up as undecided, but I think are going to break towards Biden as we get closer to November.
And of course, to see more episodes of Inside the Right, make sure to subscribe to this channel. But frankly, instead of attacking some of his most loyal mouthpieces, Donald Trump might be better served actually trying to claw back some fraction of the massive amounts of Republicans who are vowing not to vote for him in December. And yet, that doesn't seem to be of much interest to him, considering he basically said that he doesn't need them.
How do you bring these Nikki Haley voters, some of whom voted for you in 2020 but say they don't want to now?
Oh, they'll all vote for me.
How do you bring them back into the
They're going to all vote for me again. They're going to all vote for me again, everybody. And I'm not sure we need too many.
Although something tells me that when the results come in after Election Day this November, Donald Trump will be eating those words. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.